Today we are going to study about pharynx. So pharynx can be studied under the following headings. One is the gross features. Second one, the important features which you see along the lateral wall of each part of pharynx, and then the construction of wall of the pharynx, and then the muscles of pharynx. So then blood supply, nerve supply, lymphatic drainage, and then applied anatomy. So let us start with the first component, so the gross features of pharynx. So now if you just see the gross features, so they can be studied under the following headings. So first is the extent. So from where to where the pharynx extends. Then next comes the measurements. Then next comes the divisions of pharynx. So what are the three parts of the pharynx? So now let us start with the extent of pharynx. So the pharynx extends from the base of the skull to the lower border of C6 cervical vertebra. So or it can be even called as lower border of cricoid cartilage. So pharynx extends from the base of the skull till the lower border of C6 cervical vertebra or the lower border of cricoid cartilage. Then coming to the measurements. So when you look at the measurements of pharynx, so it is a musculomembranous tube, so which measures about 12 to 13 centimeters in vertical length. Then when you look at the transverse diameter, so this is wide in the upper part when compared to the lower part. Upper part it's about 3 to 3.5 centimeters wide. When it comes lower down, so that will become the narrowest part of the pharynx. It will be measuring around 1.5 centimeters. That is nothing but the last part of the pharynx. So the first part of pharynx, it is quite wide. So you can say that pharynx tapers down from above downwards. So above it is about 3 to 3.5 centimeters wide. When you come down, so it will be around 1.5 centimeters in its width. Then coming to the divisions of pharynx. So for that we need to draw the sagittal section of the head and neck, in which you can see the three divisions of pharynx. So from above onwards, these three divisions are nasopharynx, then oropharynx, and then laryngopharynx. So these three divisions are made according to the communication. So if the part of the pharynx is communicating with the nasal cavity anteriorly, then it is called nasopharynx. If it communicates with the oral cavity anteriorly, oropharynx, and if it is communicating with the larynx, then you call it as laryngopharynx. So these are the three parts of pharynx. So now let us start with the diagram, sagittal section of the head and neck, in which you will be seeing the outline of the pharynx, so including the lateral wall of the pharynx. So this is the sloping portion of the nasal cavity, which is formed by the frontal bone. Then the middle horizontal portion of the roof of the nasal cavity, so that is formed by the ethmoid. And then again posterior sloping portion of the nasal cavity, so this is formed by the sphenoid bone. So this is the rostrum and then the crest of the sphenoid bone. So to this sphenoid bone, we have the attachment of the posterior wall of the pharynx. So this is the attachment of posterior wall of the pharynx. So now this is the tip of the nose. You are seeing the anterior nares here. So the floor of the nasal cavity is formed by the hard palate, and hard palate posteriorly it gives attachment to soft palate. You come down, so you are writing the upper lip and then the lower lip, and then the region of the chin, in which you will see the mandible holding the teeth of the lower jaw. And then here if you come down, so this is the neck, then laryngeal prominence or Adam's apple, so in the anterior median plane of the neck. Then we know that mandible gives attachment to tongue, and tongue posteriorly it is attached to epiglottis. So this is epiglottis, cut section of the epiglottis. And now here this is the thyroid cartilage, and below the thyroid cartilage, now this is the cricoid cartilage, arch of the cricoid cartilage. Now here this is the hyoid bone, cut section of the hyoid bone. And if you come posteriorly, so below the epiglottis, so here you will see this is cricoid cartilage in the front, the same cricoid cartilage behind, it widens here to form the lamina of the cricoid cartilage here. So this is the lamina of the cricoid cartilage. Then above the lamina of the cricoid cartilage, you are seeing the arytenoid cartilage, and 2 small nodular cartilages, carniculate and cuneiform. Then, so if you just see here, this is the structures what we have written. So, and here along the lateral wall of the nasal cavity, you will see the 3 bony projections. These 3 bony projections we have already learnt. So, superior concha, middle concha, inferior concha. Now, so this is the lower border of the cricoid cartilage. So, this corresponds to lower border of C6 cervical vertebra. So, this is cricoid cartilage. This is thyroid cartilage. This is epiglottis. This is arytenoid. These two are carniculate, cuneiform. And now, so this is mandible, tongue, soft palate. This is hard palate. Now this is sphenoid, and this is your sphenoidal air sinus. So we have learnt in the paranasal air sinuses already. So this is pharyngeal raphe, which is a fibrous thickening in the posterior wall of the pharynx, which is attached to the sphenoid bone or base of the skull. So now we have seen the outline. So from the base of the skull here, so with a sloping roof which is sloping towards the posterior wall, So now here, so from the base of the skull till the lower border of the cricoid cartilage or lower border of the C6 cervical vertebra. So this is the extent of pharynx, the musculomembranous tube, which is a part of GIT, so as well as the respiratory system. Now look at the first part of the pharynx. So the first part of the pharynx is in communication with the nasal cavity in the front. So this is the nasal cavity, external nose, anterior nares, air comes in here, comes to the nasal cavity, and from the nasal cavity it goes to the first part of the pharynx, which is otherwise called as nasopharynx. Look at the boundaries of the nasopharynx. So anteriorly it is in communication with the nasal cavity through an opening, what you call choana. So otherwise called as posterior nares. So that will be formed by the medial pterygoid plate, plus it is also formed by the vomer. So that is the boundaries of choana or posterior nares. Then if you come above the roof of the pharynx, nasopharynx, it is formed by the sloping surface of the sphenoid bone. And now this is the posterior wall. Then below the floor of the nasopharynx, so if at all, if the soft palate, if it contracts, it will become straight like this. And you can see there is a gap here. That gap will be bridged by an elevation which is produced by a muscle in the wall of the pharynx. That muscle we can call it as palatoglossus muscle. Palatoglossus muscle. That palatoglossus muscle, it produces an elevation here after contraction that will be called as Passavant's ridge. So this is called Passavant's ridge. So approximation of Passavant's ridge to the soft palate below, above, base of the skull. Anteriorly it is in communication with the nasal cavity, and posteriorly there is wall of pharynx. So here where it is bounded by our superior constrictor muscle. So now this is the outline of nasopharynx. Now let us come down. So this nasopharynx you are seeing here, it is in communication with the nasal cavity anteriorly. So when you come down here you are seeing the oral cavity proper. So in which you are seeing that there is tongue, which is the content of the oral cavity proper. Now here this is epiglottis. Now coming to the communication here. So the portion which is below the nasopharynx and above the level of upper border of this epiglottis. So this is epiglottis, this is upper border, and this is lower border. So above the level of the upper border of the epiglottis and below the soft palate and then the Passavant's ridge. So this portion, whatever you are seeing here, this is called as oropharynx. So this is nasopharynx, this is oropharynx or second part of pharynx. So anteriorly this oropharynx is in communication with the oral cavity. So if you see the boundaries across which it is in communication with the oral cavity, so here above what you have is the palate, soft palate, and below what you have is the posterior 1/3 of the tongue. Palate is connected to the lateral border of the tongue through a fold of mucous membrane, which we have already discussed. So this is called as palatoglossal fold. Palatoglossal fold. At the same time, from the soft palate, under surface of the soft palate, there is one more fold which is descending downwards, that will be called as palatopharyngeal fold. PPF, palatopharyngeal fold. So there are two folds. One fold is descending downwards towards the pharynx. So the other one is descending downwards towards the lateral border of the tongue. So they create a triangular gap here, and within this triangular gap there is location of your palatine tonsil. So above it is bounded by soft palate, below it is bounded by posterior 1/3 of tongue, on either side it is bounded by this palatoglossal fold, that is the opening through which your oropharynx will be communicating with the oral cavity. So that will be called as oropharyngeal isthmus. Here this one where it is bounded by soft palate and then the passavant ridge behind, so this will be called as pharyngeal isthmus, where the nasopharynx will be in communication with the oropharynx. Oropharynx is in communication with the oral cavity. So through oropharyngeal isthmus, which is bounded by soft palate above, posterior 1/3 of tongue below, and this palatoglossal fold of mucous membrane on either side. So this is about the second part of pharynx, that is oropharynx. So oropharynx is in communication with the oral cavity. So in front and above it is in communication with the nasopharynx, and below it will be in communication with the laryngopharynx. Now let us see what is the extent of the laryngopharynx. So if you see the extent of the laryngopharynx here, this is quite lengthy. So it is extending from the upper border of the epiglottis, so till the lower border of the cricoid cartilage, or you can say lower border of the C6 cervical vertebra. So this is in communication with, here this is the cavity of the larynx. It is in communication with the larynx in front. Hence this part is otherwise called as laryngopharynx. So this is laryngopharynx. So anteriorly this is in communication with the larynx. Above this is in communication with the oropharynx, and behind there is posterior wall of the phalanx itself, and lower down. So here the larynx at the lower border of C6 cervical vertebra, or at the lower border of cricoid cartilage, larynx continues as trachea and pharynx continues as esophagus. So this will be in continuous with the esophagus lower down. So this is the extent of pharynx. So now once we have seen the extent of the pharynx, you need to study about the features of each part of pharynx. So what are the special features which you see in the nasopharynx? What are the special features you will see in the oropharynx? And then the features of laryngopharynx. So for that we will draw one more diagram, and we will just see what are the special features of lateral wall of nasopharynx, oropharynx and laryngopharynx.